Hello, everyone, and welcome to this panel discussion arranged by Kearney in association with CNBC Arabia. My name is May bin Kadra, and it's my pleasure to be the moderator of today's session. As part of the What's Next dialogue series initiated by Kearney, today's panel will be covering the future of media in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has always been the most important market for media industry, in addition to being the largest economy in this region. Here to talk about this topic and more is Mr. Adel Bilqaid, Communications, Media and Technology at Kearney. Mr. Faris Aqad, he's the Director of News Partnerships for Growth Markets at Facebook, and Mr. Qaswar Al-Khatib, Chairman at Webedia Arabia and founder of U-Turn. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Hello.
Thank you. Mr. Adel, let me start with you as this discussion talks about the importance of Saudi Arabia for the media industry in the Middle East. Why is Saudi Arabia has this huge weight in this industry, and to what extent do you think that there are a lot of growth opportunities and potentials there?
So, as you said yourself, it has been and it has always been the largest media market in the Arab world. It has to do, of course, with it being the largest economy and one of the largest populations in the Arab world. So to give some numbers, the media market size in Saudi Arabia is about $4.4 billion. And that's about 30% of the the pan-Arab media market. For comparison purposes, UAE is about 2.7 billion, and Egypt, which has always been a major media market, at least culturally, is about $2 billion. So the numbers speak for themselves, and yes. Saudi Arabia is indeed a major market and focus of the media industry in the region. Why is Saudi Arabia at this stand-in? For simple reasons. First, the population and the young population. As you know, 60% of Saudi population is below 35 years old, and this is naturally a big driver of media consumption. The young population of Saudi Arabia also happens to be very tech savvy, so very early adopters of new technologies, and also very media hungry. So Saudis on average spend about 6 hours on various media platforms, especially digital media, and about 3 hours a day on social media, which is a high number. And also, it has been said time and again that Saudi Arabia ranks as one of the most eager users of YouTube globally, not just in the Middle East or the Arab world, but globally it is taking the top spots. So this is with regards to the population and the young population in particular. Another asset of Saudi Arabia is the infrastructure. Especially in the ICT, so information and communication infrastructure. Saudi Arabia has always been an early adopter of new technologies and one of the first at the global level to launch latest generation mobile networks. So 3G, 4G, 5G, it has been a consistent trend. And today, Saudi Arabia ranks I think number 8 among G20 countries in terms of digital infrastructure readiness, which is a very nice position to be, and testament to the huge investments that happened over the last 5 years by the different government stakeholders and private stakeholders in Saudi Arabia. So yes, that's essentially the drivers of why Saudi Arabia is where it is in terms of media importance.
So Mr. Faris, Mr. Adel just mentioned several factors, one of which is the demographics. And this is actually true because demographics actually kind of accelerate the growth when it comes to social media marketing, social media in general. To what extent Do you agree with this notion? To what extent do you see that this factor, the demographics, is a huge accelerator for growth in this industry?
First of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you. It's absolutely a massive factor, right? Especially in the industry we're in, the youth tends to be early adapters and major adapters of this technology. We see this happening in terms of also consumption. In Saudi Arabia, we see about double the global average of video consumptions on our platform, which is huge. And regardless of the forum, so some platforms are longer form, some platforms are shorter form. Regardless of what the format is, Saudi Arabia seems to always kind of be pioneering and leading in terms of that consumption. And that's indicative to many factors. I would add to that also like the high penetration of smartphones, and there's many other factors that play into that. The other interesting part is we've seen also a lot of pioneering and creativity come from Saudis in terms of generating content. And that's really interesting. So we see creators in Saudi usually enjoy 50 to 60% of their following from the kingdom itself. And that's usually is not that common. Usually creators will see, the nature of the platform is that it offers you a global following. So that indicates to me a hunger for local content. And we see a lot of huge creators that enjoy massive popularity, and they're able to use their creativity to cater to the Saudi audience and cater to Saudi consumption needs, where maybe some of the established broadcasters have fallen a bit short. And there's a huge vacuum there. The likes of U-Turn and others have filled that gap. And that has been extremely interesting. The Saudi consumer also seems to benefit from this. We did a survey with Ipsos recently where over 90% of the Saudi consumers said they connected closer to their brands on social media. They're able to connect closer because the nature of the advertising allows a two-way communication with the brand. And in many cases, they're using influencer marketing where they follow someone they trust or they kind of find affiliation with their lifestyle. And then when this person recommends a brand or recommends a product or a service,
he's trustworthy.
He's trustworthy, and it resonates a lot closer. And if you have feedback, then you can give that feedback to the representative, or you can give that feedback to the brand, and you communicate. It's very different than the old traditional satellite beam that is targeting a product to the masses. So this much more customized approach, on demand, anywhere, at all times, seems to hit a chord with the new, more demanding consumer in Saudi.
Mr. Kaswara, I've seen you nodding your head to a lot of the thoughts that were mentioned by Mr. Adel and Mr. Faris. I want to focus with you on what Mr. Faris was telling us, that the content side, that what Saudi Arabia has is a huge market for content makers. To what extent do you believe and do you agree with this idea? To what extent do you think that there is more growth potential regarding growth in content?
So I totally agree with the gentleman before me in what they said, because it's true. Saudi is a big market, is a big economy. A lot of the people in here, 60% are young and the youth. Internet penetration is high. Smartphones penetration is also high. We've had the 4G, now we have the 5G. However, I think what makes it more interesting is there is that hunger. So maybe Saudi is slightly different than other countries where mainstream TV was not as big. So we know other countries that several, satellite channels, TV channels. We did not have that in Saudi in the previous years or in the old year before. However, what happened with the social media is it became a new platform for Saudis to express themselves. We were never in the export of content. We were always consumers of content. If you look historically, we've used or we consumed content from the region, internationally. We did not have our fair share of content creation. However, today, what made it different is we're exporting content. So consumption is very high, as the gentleman said, but I would also like to add that even creation is high. So this is what makes it different. With the ease of using content, doing content, you don't need big production studios, you don't need big cameras, you don't need laptops or big equipment to edit and render. Today you do all of that with a phone and then probably a laptop that you could edit on. So this made the opportunity much easier for people to to join, to create content. And what made it interesting is we started showing what we really are about. So Saudis started relating to other content that we do. We speak about stuff that's happening in our everyday life. And people wanted to know more about Saudi. You know, we probably were a black box for a while. Maybe we were not, you know, exposed enough to the rest of the world. However, with the social media came that opportunity whereby, you know, individuals started creating content, and companies like us and others, where we utilize this opportunity and influx of young talents, creative talents who really want to try and experiment. If you look at the beginning when we started U-Turn back in 2002, and you know, I sometimes every now and then I go back and I look at the content we created back in 2010 versus today, we were really at the very beginning. It was very basic. The only thing that kept us going was we wanted to try, we wanted to experiment, we wanted to reach out, and it wasn't something, you know, when you're doing and not expecting it's going to be as big. All what you want to do is express yourself and see an opportunity, and you want to use this opportunity. And this is what happened with us in U-Turn and Saudi in general. More of these people started using the internet, the platforms. I mean, when we started back in 2010, it was only YouTube that had, you know, like what you could consider user-generated content. After that, you know, came Snapchat, and came Facebook videos and Instagram videos and TikTok and what have you. And ever since then, we've been very quick to adapt to whatever new that comes. So you'd find influencers or content creators on all the platforms, and there are those who are working on YouTube. There are others who migrate to new platforms and you know, experiment with these new platforms. And I think this is what makes it very interesting and different than most of other countries, because of sometimes, you know, the need creates, or the necessity creates the need. So we wanted to reach out. We wanted to, you know, express ourselves. We wanted to do content from us to us. And this was really the opportunity that presented itself. And I think we just grabbed this opportunity. And, you know, I'm very happy where we are today. And I think, you know, as everybody sees, there is a huge opportunity. And we're still yet to see even more. I think we haven't reached the surface. We're still, you know, scratching basically through it. Exactly. With more technology coming, with more internet penetration, with better streaming, we will see more and more content that's coming out of this region.
We definitely need to talk about these opportunities Mr. Kaswara was referring to, but one is the 2030 vision, Saudi vision. To what extent do you see it, Mr. Adel, as a catalyst for this industry in Saudi Arabia?
It is both a catalyst and a direct beneficiary of the media industry.
Tell us how.
So if we look at Vision 2030, I mean, the three main, very famous dimensions that I think everyone knows about, it's a vibrant society, it's a thriving economy, and it's an ambitious nation. These are the main three pillars. If we look under each of them, of course, each of them has you know, numerous objectives, but the ones that are directly relevant to the media sector under vibrant society is really about the, you know, the diversification of cultural and entertainment offerings, okay? And media directly contributes to enabling and achieving this objective. It also has an objective about strengthening national values and national identity. And again, what sector better than media to help achieve this objective? On the second dimension, which is about the, you know, the thriving economy, this is more essentially about diversifying away from the oil sector and promoting the SME sector and building local talent and increasing the human capital of Saudi Arabia. And again, the media sector is across the board. And last but not least, the third dimension, which is about an ambitious nation. Here we see you know, elements about government transparency, government accountability, etc. And again, this is all visible and palpable through the media sector. So whichever way you look at it, I see the media sector as both an enabler of Vision 2030 and a beneficiary of Vision 2030, and vice versa. Vision 2030 depends on the media sector to achieve its full potential. I mean, when we look at the market size of 4.4 billion, sometimes we might think that compared to other sectors in Saudi Arabia, this is a small sector, but we should never underestimate the power, the soft power, the direct power of the media sector, and the multiplier effects.
Especially since we're talking about the power of social media, we have to talk about as well the structural shifts we have seen in social media and in media in general after post-COVID-19. We're going to come back to talk about this, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to go in a short break and we're going to come back to continue this discussion. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this panel discussion. We're discussing the future of media post-COVID-19 and the importance of Saudi Arabia as a market for this specific sector. I want to go now back to Mr. Fares. Mr. Fares, since you're representing this king of social media, to what extent have we seen structural shifts in social media platforms following COVID-19, especially because, like, more than half the Earth people's population have been on lockdown. So to what extent did that change the preferences of people logging into social media?
Well, a couple of things. I think COVID has accelerated the digitization of many industries.
Yes.
I think it cut, probably what was going to happen in 5 years into months. We've seen that as well. I think with social distancing, lockdowns, we've seen a lot of shift to overconsumption in our platforms. What we usually used to see a peak during New Year's Eve, people sending, salutations and congratulations. We saw that sustained for the whole period around COVID, which put a lot of strain on the systems, put a lot of strain on the engineers, etc. We saw video calls double. We saw messaging skyrocket, and people were using this to be physically distant but not socially distant. They were using it to stay close with their families and friends, and they couldn't be close to them. So we saw that as an opportunity to also inform many of our users about information from the World Health Organization, redirect people to important announcements from local government. So we worked with ministries of health across the region because these were shifting regulations. Now there's lockdown, curfew, etc., and these were all being communicated. We also saw because the pandemic was such a new and disease and crisis for the world, where there wasn't a lot of information in general. When there isn't a lot of information, there's also a propensity to be hungry for any information.
Curiosity.
And that leads to misinformation
Yes.
also spreading. So we had to double down our efforts on fact-checking. We had to remove a lot of content from our platform. We had to be very strict with how we tackle a lot of this information. So, our point of reference was the World Health Organization and the local ministries of health. We redirect people towards that. We work with over 60 different organizations around the world that do fact-checking for us. And if they see anything that is not true, that is fact-checked, they have the right to deprecate that content, in some cases remove it. But with the increased usability comes also the increased pressure of having to manage this. This is not something that you can absolutely fix. You can better manage. It's a massive responsibility. We recognize that. And we work very closely with regulators, and we work very closely with advisors. We have an oversight board also at Facebook that looks at cases where we remove something, we might make a mistake. But it's a process that we take very, very seriously.
So there was pressure due to this pandemic. Let me move to Mr. Qaswara. Mr. Qaswara, when we talk about the media industry in general, what kind of structural shifts have we witnessed post-COVID-19?
So from our perspective, basically, before the COVID, things were, it was on secondary basis. So we have the social media, but we also have our life. We have the mainstream media. I think with what happened with COVID, it was more the rely on social media. People were sitting home. So the consumption was much, much higher. And new type of content started emerging with people sitting home. Nothing to do. So instead of wasting the time, I think they wanted to utilize their time in a way where they express themselves. We saw a lot of content types being, coming out. We saw interviews, we saw live sessions on different platforms, which was something that we never saw before. It used to be more of, you log on social media, let me check what's happening. I have a bit of free time, I log in and check what's going on. After the COVID, I think what happened is social media became a mainstream. So people, it's a habit, we log in to know what is happening, to get news, to get information. So there has been a bit of more influx of content, and this is probably where regulation started coming, because we want to regulate what is acceptable to tell people and what is right versus what is not right. But the common thing was definitely there was a lot of influx of content. Even those people who were just viewers or just checking, they became content creators. They wanted to be part of this change that's happening. They wanted to express themselves. They believed they had something to share with the rest of the world. And I think these are the dynamics that happened before and after.
So, Mr. Adil, when we talk about this, let me put it exactly in the words of Mr. Khaswara, social media becoming a mainstream, to what extent does that accelerate digital marketing as well?
Well, I wouldn't limit it only to social media. I would speak about digital media in general, and there is always the Netflix and Amazon and all of these things who have benefited hugely from COVID pandemic as well. Huh? So, traditional advertising, TV-based or newspaper-based or whatever you consider here, it has always been, the fundamental question was return on investment. How can I be sure that that advertising spend on traditional video or print platforms actually reached the target audience that it was meant to reach? And did that target audience act on that advertising? And did I really get an uptick in sales, etc.? It was never possible to measure that kind of activity very precisely. Digital advertising gives you the solution, pioneered, of course, by Google, but then, Facebook and other platforms joined and took it to another level. And here you have finally cracked the big mystery of marketing, which is the return on investment, because the value proposition is just irresistible. Traditional media cannot compete with this in the sense that you only pay when someone interacted with your ad, etc. So this was before COVID, okay? But I would say COVID helped accelerate the trend because, again, just people, for using the words of Khaswara, they had nothing else to do. They were at home. They were always, or most of the time, online. Therefore, the eyeballs were there waiting for interaction with products and services. And it's digital advertising that enabled this connection building on digital content platforms. So that's how I would put it.
Mr. Faris, to what extent do you believe that the regulatory environment is really important for the digital media industry or for the media industry as a general? And to what extent do you think that it's important in Saudi Arabia to encourage young Saudis to to have a bigger role in the economy and in this sector?
So look, as far as regulation, I think reasonable regulation that takes into consideration the dynamic of how the industry works is important. It's very different to TV, where you have like one stream and a very direct censorship on that stream, etc. I think social media gives a voice to everybody, and we have always to create that balance between giving people the freedom of speech, balancing it with the safety of our community, and it's something that we take very seriously and we constantly work on. I think, as Khaswara alluded to, part of the appeal that has happened on social media is that the creators in Saudi were able to explore things that historically TV has not explored. Dramas historically were 30 days, 30 episodes, because Ramadan is 30 days, and they're 45 minutes because this is what advertisers wanted to do, and it's just crazy like that. If you watch a show on Netflix, you save yourself X amount of
20 minutes,
yes,
at least 20 minutes.
In Egypt, probably a bit more. Yeah. And so these dynamics for a generation that grew up on social media are so foreign now, because if you exclusively watch a non-advertising VOD, you save yourself 11 days of advertising. So 11 days of your life. If you only watch, the average consumer watches VOD only, you save 11 days. So think of the idea of even the way we serve ads, which are targeted to your interest and subtle in a way that they're not disruptive to your experience. The demand from the customer now is at that level of saying, I don't want to see an ad that is not relevant to me, and I don't want to see an ad that is going to disrupt my experience. And I also, by the way, want to see an ad that the ad itself is a piece of content, which is creative and interesting. And now we see ads that you see it in the US when they do the Super Bowl. Some people will go and just watch the ads because of the amount of creativity. So I think it's a new era of marketing and reaching the consumer. And that's what has accelerated in the advertising industry. So the algorithm in our case tries to target these ads as much as possible. So to you, they are useful, not disruptive. And the creative industry has caught up in many ways that we encourage many of our clients to serve ads that are also entertaining and relevant.
Mr. Kaswara, also let me add to what Mr. Faris was saying, that it's a new era for marketing. It's also a new era for the young population to feel like they are, they have bigger purpose and maybe they have bigger role in the country, in the governments, in the economy, in the society as a whole. What is the importance, in your opinion, of including more Saudis, especially when we talk about labor in this industry? Because until now, we have seen some kind of divergence when it comes to this.
Very good question. There is a saying that goes, عندنا أهل مكة أدرى بشعابها. Well, Ahl Makkah knows more about Mecca, I guess. So I guess in any country, I mean, it's not just limited to Saudi Arabia. I guess in the end, such economies need to be driven from the masses. And the masses are the people who are consuming the content, but at the same time, they're the ones who are created the content. So you cannot isolate the people of a country from its industry. Now, especially where we're talking today, where digital media and social media is becoming mainstream, we need to have more of these young content creators creating content, but that's not where it stops. I mean, what people see is in front of the screen is the content creator. However, behind that, there's a whole ecosystem, from content writers to editors to directors to cinematographers, people who do films, and the whole industry. So this is very important because we want people to understand that this is our country, and if we're going to grow with it's going to grow with its people. Now, the beautiful part is, most of the people in Saudi who are today, active on social media or they're creating content, a lot of them didn't even study. People came into this industry by passion, probably an opportunity knocked itself. We didn't have institutes, we didn't have colleges, that teaches this. But the beautiful part is, like, you start seeing now initiatives by the government or initiatives by the private sector that are helping young Saudis craft this industry. For instance, we have our startup hub digital in Jeddah, which is in collaboration with Munshaat, the SME authority, and we're running an incubator now to help young content creators take this as an industry and create a profession out of it, rather than just being an amateur or just being somebody who's passionate about it. We also know Wazarat al-Ittisalat, the Ministry of Communication, they've launched a big initiative called Launch KSA, with the objective of empowering young digital savvy people, with the objective of empowering Saudis in general, with the partnerships with the likes of Google and Apple, to be able to speed up the digital economy and put sort of the right know-how, if you will, what is happening with Google and Facebook and the others, and how can we build on that one for Saudis to expedite into the future. I think these initiatives are clear message coming to the people in Saudi that this is where the opportunity lies, and it is something that we have to work with it. Now, we're not going to claim that we know it all. I think today, with the beauty of what's happening with us, is like it is a mix between the Saudis and the experts, non-Saudis who are experts, to come up and create this amazing mix that we have today in the digital media, in the social media, in the streaming services, and again, the future is still bright, and hopefully we see more to come. Yeah.
I will get back to this point because it's really interesting about the lessons that can be learned from international peers when it comes to the media industry. But I want to come back to you, Mr. Adel and Mr. Faris. We were discussing initiatives. To what extent do you think that enough initiatives are being done in Saudi Arabia to nurture the new local talents there and to include them in this industry? Mr. Adel, go ahead.
I think the short answer is a lot. And it is actually quite timely that we are discussing this. I think just 2 weeks ago, there was a major announcement from the cabinet, so the Council of Ministers in Saudi Arabia, about the creation of the Digital Content Council. So this is formally recognized by the government as somehow, the overseer of the digital content industry, and that's because digital content today is the new media. So you could say that this is about promoting media industry in Saudi Arabia. This council, which is under the direct oversight of the country leadership, which is represented by many senior ministers, It has 36 different initiatives that cut across development, regulation, and governance. And it comes with an envelope, a budgetary envelope of 4 billion Saudi riyals. So this is really a major step from the government of Saudi Arabia to recognize the importance of this industry and recognize or formalize the role of the government to make it happen and remove all the frictions and all the bottlenecks so that Saudi Arabia becomes a popular destination for the media industry. It has always been a major market, but economic activity related to the media industry was very little because most of it was happening outside of the country. And we tried to actually measure the economic activity that was actually happening in Saudi Arabia. It was about 7%. Meaning that 93% is happening
outside
elsewhere,
the country.
You know, here or in neighboring countries, to produce content that is serving, targeted to Saudi Arabia. But all the activity, the value chain that Qaswara was referring to in terms of cinematographers, screenwriters, talent, actors, etc., was essentially outside, okay? For the sake of comparison, if you look at leading countries in the media space like US and others, 60% of the economic activity happens within
inside the country.
Inside the country.
Whether it's about media sector or any
exactly.
other sector.
So this is very important, and we need to localize. And this was recognized by the Saudi government, and this is happening. I am aware of a number of initiatives.
Yes.
In terms of talent, for example, it's about launching academies. There is an initiative about music academy in Saudi Arabia, film academy, theater academy, things that we didn't know about.
A lot of progress is is happening there. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go on a short break, and we're going to come back to continue this discussion. Don't go away. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this panel discussion. We're talking about the future of social media and the media sector in general in Saudi Arabia. We were talking just moments ago about the initiatives taken by the Saudi government to maybe nurture local talents when it comes to this sector. I want to discuss now the lessons and the experience of international peers when it comes to this sector. To what extent do you think, Mr. Faris, that there are a couple of lessons that might be really important for local content makers when it comes to this industry, especially that because it's kind of new to us. It's kind of new to the region. It's not like it was internationally. So to what extent do you think that there's a lot to learn when it comes to this?
I think there's quite a bit to learn. Unlike maybe some other industry, this is relatively new everywhere. But I would say some global players have leaned in a bit more. And this starts with the idea of understanding that the concept of media or entertainment has shifted. When we talk about entertainment, people gravitate towards a movie or a series. But today, it's really the currency is attention. And if you think about how much you spend a week on attention on certain media, I think social media would take a good chunk of that. You might spend a couple of hours a day in various platforms. And so catering to those platforms is important. And catering to those platforms and aligning synergies between your business and those platforms. We've seen anywhere from many organizations producing content exclusively for those platforms, whether it's shows or concepts, having a network of creators, all the way to using them as marketing, using them for research tools, etc. But I think it starts with recognizing that this is now an essential part of our social fabric in the way we communicate, in the way we put our brand out, in the way we engage with our consumer. And I think that's what we see with leading brands around the globe, is that they see social not as a channel, they see it as a primary way to communicate with consumers. And then everything else has to have that social aspect integrated in it. Once you start thinking that way, I think it changes the way you view your consumer, it changes the way you engage with audiences, and you start catering to it in a way that takes into consideration things like people are watching this on the phone, they might not have audio. So I will create a content with that in mind. I'm not going to think about a traditional ad that requires someone to sit for 30 seconds.
No, it's more of a customized experience.
Absolutely. You have to think that this is where they're spending most of their time. And so I need to think for them, where historically you used to have a captive audience because they're waiting to see what's going to happen after the commercial. That's not the case now. The opportunity cost is very low for someone to just swipe up.
Mr. Kaswara, what are the challenges ahead, in your opinion?
I think the biggest challenge that we have is as Faris was just saying, we're still learning. So we need to continue learning. It's not like we've reached, we think, we're leading the region, means, we've had it all. I think we still need to continue learning. And probably what we need to start seeing, hopefully in the near future, is where we start having platforms of our own. So today we're still reliant on platforms that are not created by us in the region. However, I think that's another challenge where we could start creating our own platforms, if you will, our own type of engagement, if you like.
Why haven't we
Because
witnessed that yet, Mr. Kaswara, in your opinion?
I think it's not just limited to the platforms. It's in general in the region. We've been in the past several years. We've been slow in adapting. We've been slow in moving. Yes, we have the funds, but we were still relying a lot on the West. So we're sort of importing everything from the West, and we're just using it. This is where we're hoping today the mindset changes, that since we can create, then we can export. So it is just a matter of maybe time. And I see today the government, at least in Saudi Arabia, is pumping in a lot of money and collaborating with, as I said earlier, a lot of these big tech companies to bring that technology, to bring that know-how to Saudi Arabia and allow the young Saudis to be part of that learning. So once, it becomes a norm, once the whole society talks this language, the whole society has access to the new platforms or technology or development ability to develop new platforms, it's just going to happen. So what we need first is to bring sort of the know-how, have institute, colleges, if you want to call it, any type of professional experience transformation, and we will reach there. I don't think we have an issue of capability. I think the whole issue is just a matter of time and putting the right infrastructure into place.
Mr. Adel, to what extent would you agree with that?
I agree with that, of course, 100%. I will also want to mention, we spoke a lot about digital media and social media, but there is still a big chunk of media that we call traditional media that is going through, I would say, even more challenges. So if we think about the newspaper industry, the print industry in Saudi Arabia and elsewhere, it's a question of survival today. They have lost two major revenue streams. So the paid, the
subscription,
paid circulation or subscription. You have less and less people buying titles and magazines because they take their news and their stories from their screens. And then the ripple effect of this is the advertising money that also vanished to the benefit of digital platforms and social media platforms, etc. So major big players are having the means to transform themselves and invest in the technology, the digital capabilities that are required to move into the new age. But a lot of smaller players are not able to do that shift, and they are seeing essentially their business vanishing. I would say that this challenge happened a little bit at a slower rate in Saudi Arabia than globally. It was more of a radical bloodbath, to use extreme words, in Europe and elsewhere, where you just have a lot of regional, local titles, newspapers, magazines that just closed shop and fired everyone, and they are nowhere.
It's a new era, so
exactly. But here there was a bit of government support, protection to keep things running, but eventually the transition to digital has not happened fully yet, and this is a fundamental challenge. And I think these players need support so that they can navigate this major change.
Mr. Adel, you wanted to discuss more details about local content making. And Mr. Kaswara was just mentioning a lot of challenges that Saudis face. And I think Arabs face generally when we talk about local content making. To what extent do you think these challenges can be resolved?
I believe yes, of course, there is this challenge. Today, there is an undersupply of quality local content. And I think we just need to put our efforts and forces together, private sector and public sector, to push this through the finish line, because the potential of local content has never been as important. I mean, we speak a lot about global platforms and Netflix and Facebook and Amazon Prime, etc. But let's not forget that a major part of Netflix strategy and Amazon strategy is also to invest in local content and take that local content globally. And it's very, very popular. I never thought I would enjoy watching series from Spain, Brazil, whatever, but it is. And this is part of the strategy of Netflix. I am impatient to see that, the blockbuster series coming from Saudi Arabia and exporting beyond the frontiers of Saudi Arabia. I was looking at a publication from the KSA. This is the audiovisual, let's say, kind of regulator in France. And they said that for the first time ever, the top 10 titles, so content titles, series mainly, are all local. There is not a single foreign series, drama, in the top 10. And the same trend is in Germany, and the same trend is in UK, and the same trend is in Italy. So, this is the age of local content, okay? And when it is done with the right quality, there is huge latent demand that is waiting to be served, and the potential is simply infinite here. So, and not just in Saudi Arabia, but in many countries in the world. And I think it's high time to invest in this opportunity.
That's the key word there I want to ask Mr. Kaswara about. Mr. Kaswara, to what extent do you believe that enough investments are being made in the sector, the media industry in general, when it comes to Saudi Arabia?
So it's not enough, definitely. We want more, and we expect to have more investment to come, but it has definitely changed. So if I can give you an example, I remember back in 2016, we had a meeting with Netflix when they were just still coming to the region, and the strategy was to focus on bringing, like the streaming for all the international content, to bring it to this region. If you look at today what's happening, they are producing original content out of Saudi Arabia, and as well as the other neighboring countries. For instance, we had Techie, one of the top, on the first series we've done on U-Turn when we first started back in 2011, and YouTube was the only place for it to be put. During the pandemic, everybody was sitting home. We were approached by Netflix, and we managed to put Techie Season 1 and 2 on Netflix. But the interesting news is we just finished with them filming Techie Season 3 as an original production of Netflix. So this tells you that there is a need, there is definitely a potential. It's not enough. We would like to get more. Instead of having 2 or 3 shows coming out of Saudi, for instance, in a year, we want to see like other countries where all the top 10 consumed content in Saudi are Saudi content. So to answer your question, is there a need for more investment? Of course, and we expect the investment to come from the private sector, from international companies that are working here, as well as from the government. And that's the only way to reach where we want. Because if you look at even productions, sometimes the big productions that we see is really expensive production. We weren't used to this expensive production on what we call digital platforms or streaming, because again, it used to be traditionally the YouTube, the Facebook, and the Instagrams and what have you. When we moved to big platforms, streaming platforms, the likes of Netflix, Amazon, and the others, there are really huge budgets that are being spent on a series is as equivalent as a film, the amount of production and tech element that's put into it. And that's what we would like to start seeing in here. So we want to see bigger budgets for bigger productions out of this. And it's just, again, it's starting now. Hopefully with the shows that come out of Saudi, that gets good recognition, we will see more investment coming into content in Saudi Arabia.
So this is the end of our panel discussion. I want to thank our guests for coming to CNBC studios today. Mr. Adel Belqayed, Partner Communications, Media and Technology at Kearney. Mr. Faris Aqad, Director of News Partnership for Growth Markets at Facebook. And Mr. Qaswar Al-Khatib, Chairman at Webedia Arabia and founder of U-Turn. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for watching. Goodbye.